Speaker, the petroleum resource rent tax is supposed to ensure that Australians get a fair return when their oil and gas resources are sold overseas. But the current system is completely broken. In the last couple of years, Australian LNG exports boomed as gas prices skyrocketed, with Climate Energy Finance estimating that gross profits of LNG exporters exceeded $63.5 billion in 2022. But despite these profits, and despite gas exporters being able to extract these resources without paying any additional royalties, the Australian people have seen little return. In the 2020 to 2021 financial year, there were 33 projects eligible for PRRT, yet only 6 paid any tax. And even more shockingly, despite Australia being the second largest LNG exporter in the world, the most recent set of budget papers noted that not a single LNG project has paid any PRRT, and many are not expected to pay significant amounts of PRRT until the 2030s. So the changes to the PRRT are welcome, and I appreciate the government taking action on this. It was well overdue. But sadly, the government has not gone far enough in its changes and reform. Whilst a few projects that would never have paid PRRT will now do so, the main impact of this bill is to bring forward a small amount of revenue a few years earlier, giving the budget bottom line a boost today at the cost of taxpayers tomorrow. And it's not even as much revenue as you would think. The reforms were originally slated to bring in just $600 million a year over the forward estimates, despite gas companies bringing in an additional $20 billion in revenue in the last financial year alone. And yet, in the latest mid-economic and fiscal outlook, this amount has shrunk even further. The lack of significant reform on PRRT is not only a missed opportunity for the budget bottom line, it's a missed opportunity to fund the kind of cost of living relief that households desperately need right now. If the government lowered the deductions cap from 90% to 80%, it could fully fund a people power plan that permanently lowers power bills for nearly 500,000 households by turbocharging the uptake of rooftop solar, home electrification and improved home energy performance. The government has not yet taken this chance, but it must, and I hope it changes its way, at least in the Senate. I also want to put in record my deep concerns about the concession the government are rumoured to be making to secure support in the Senate, which could result in massive expansion of the fossil fuel industry in the midst of a climate crisis. This would be a deep betrayal. And so my amendment asks the government to be open into doing things better in the future, to reviewing whether these new arrangements are delivering a fair return, and to further reform the tax if necessary. My amendment would insert a statutory review of the changes to the PRRT to be commenced no later than the 1st of July 2026. This would allow 2 full financial years for the government changes to have taken effect, and for it to become clear whether these reforms are delivering an equitable return to the taxpayer. Like the Callaghan Review and the Gas Transfer Pricing Review, this review would examine whether the super profits from our resources are being shared equally between the taxpayer and gas exporters. But unlike these reviews, it will consider how learnings from reforms to the PRRT could be applied to the other resource export industries, which are increasingly important as our economy decarbonises. This is a reasonable and constructive amendment that would help deliver a fairer return for Australian taxpayers in the future. And I'd like to make one further point, which is that we sent this amendment to the Treasurer's Office back in November last year, and I think it was only today or yesterday that we got a response or engagement on this amendment. And I will constantly work with respect with members of the government on this and on any other amendments, because they are made in good faith. These are challenges that I'm making because I think they could be better, but I'm open always to have a conversation about these things. And I was very disappointed not to get more constructive engagement from the Treasurer or Assistant Treasurer on these matters, because they are really important, and my community expects to understand, in a fulsome way and in an appropriate and time-appropriate way, what is the government's position on this, and if we have different views, why those are there, so that we can engage constructively, perhaps to come to a middle